This guy is probably the smartest president. Why am I holding that upside down? I'm mad they wrote a biography about me. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about books. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about books about U.S. presidents. And although that doesn't strictly have anything to do with translation, I wanted to talk about it because it's something, since I've been here in the States, I decided I was going to read a biography of every U.S. president. And so that's what I've been doing. I should say right off the bat, I'm not finished yet because I got to Benjamin Harrison. So I'm more than halfway there, but I haven't finished yet. But I wanted to get some thoughts thus far of what I've read. So, and then I should also mention, I had read some before. I'd read one on George Washington before, Thomas Jefferson. I read more than one on Thomas Jefferson because he was my favorite president, growing up and stuff. Abraham Lincoln, I listened to a good one on Audible on Abraham Lincoln. And also the ones I've been reading since then, they've been both physical books, like these ones, or they've been ones like on Kindle, as you can see, like John Tyler, Zachary Taylor, Franklin Pierce, Millard Fillmore, James Buchanan, or also on Audible. I think, like Grover Cleveland here, you probably can't see. The Unexpected President, that was Chester Arthur. And so all different types of formats, basically whatever I can find. So the way I've been going about it is, first of all, I keep an eye on different things. Like this one, I found it at a used bookstore for, I think, $5. And so I was like, I'm definitely getting Ron Chernow's book on Grant because that's awesome. Otherwise, most of the ones I get are used. I like used books in general. I think I've mentioned it before. Like my wife scolded me because I literally see a new book and a used book for the same price, and I get the used book because I like it so much more. Anyway, but my go-to thing, if I can't find a good biography of the U.S. president, there's basically this collection, and Arthur Schlesinger. I can never pronounce his name right. Anyway, he actually commissioned a collection of biographies of all the U.S. presidents. And so you can find stuff, if you're searching for, say, William Henry Harrison, this is pretty much all you're going to find because he was the one who was in office for just a month before he died. And so, you're not going to find much more of him. He's the first president to die in office as well. So I want to go through a couple of my thoughts thus far about these U.S. presidents. So I wrote, if you follow me on Goodreads, I can leave the link below. Then I actually wrote more on each individual biography that I read, more of my thoughts and stuff. But here I just wanted to go through briefly some thoughts in general. And I wasn't really sure how to structure this. So I think I'm doing this video because then when I do finish the biographies, I'm not sure exactly how far I want to go. I might stop at like Eisenhower, Kennedy or something, just because then it gets too much into the modern age and, modern stuff. Like I feel like some time needs to pass before you can kind of look back more objectively. Anyway, but I'm not sure how to structure that final video. So now I'm kind of going through it and giving a couple of thoughts, and then I'll see how I feel about it. So first of all, some stuff in general. It's really interesting to read the biographies in chronological order because when you do, you see not only their biography, but its place in history. Like you literally go from the founding of the nation to, eventually to the present time, pretty much. Now I'm up to the 1880s, 1890s, and it's very interesting to see how you go from the sense of the founding fathers to then later people who kind of show their credentials by being friends or knowing the founding fathers to other people showing their credentials for having met once an aging founding father, and and obviously then later everyone kind of passes away, but you still had some, like I think Dolly Madison, James Madison's wife, lived until the 1850s, which is quite a bit. And so anyway, but it's interesting to see that progression and also how times change. Also, it's interesting because each and every president that I read about, I kind of don't only read his biography, but I read at least two other biographies of his, because the president before and the president after will always also talk about that president. So it's interesting to see the different ways in which this president will be viewed depending on the other person's biography. And, some more, some less. Like when I read, Chester Arthur, fact is, there's not that much to say. There's quite a bit to say, but he's not that singular of a person at the end of the day. And so, it talked a lot more about people like James Garfield and all that. By the way, James Garfield was probably the most surprising biography I came about. And this is the book that I read of James Garfield, The Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard. I highly recommend this book just because, I mean, I didn't know anything about him except he got shot, and that was it. But actually, he was an extremely interesting guy. The way he got elected was so interesting. He went to the convention not running for president. He went there to, help someone else run. And then all this stuff happened. He wasn't even on the ballot, and then suddenly he got elected because of all these things happening. It's very interesting. So he suddenly ended up in the White House. He was actually, in fact, going to leave when he saw that he was about to be elected. He's like, and it was his aide who told him, no, you need to stay here. You can't just like run away. And so it was very interesting. And so yeah, I don't even know what thoughts really to bring up. Like, ones in general, you can see slavery is obviously a huge thing, and it was a huge thing a lot, prior to this, pretty much since this country became a country, and a lot more prior to the Civil War than just the Civil War's time, and you see it building up quite obviously. Obviously now we have the benefit of hindsight, but even then you could tell it was a very important thing. And by the way, a lot of times, like I live in the South, and I've heard people say that the Civil War was not about slavery. That's hogwash. It was absolutely positively about slavery. And you see this building up so much. There's so many different aspects. Like California, it got delayed becoming a state because in the initial letter that they sent to Congress saying we want to become a state, they said this will be a free state. We won't allow slavery. And they didn't even think it would be an issue because they weren't going to have slavery there anyway. So they just mentioned it. But the fact that they mentioned it there became this huge hoopla. And so people didn't allow it to become a state at the beginning and all this stuff. And it was totally about that. And what you hear, I remember I went to this tour in Charleston, and they were talking there like, oh, it wasn't about slavery because when Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, he said slavery wasn't allowed in southern states, but he's still allowed in the northern states, and it was allowed in certain parts of Maryland and Pennsylvania and Delaware and stuff like that, and that's true. But on the other hand, he did it because he did it in steps. In one fell swoop, he did all the South because he's like, we're at war with them, so obviously we're going to start there, and then we're also going to build up and get rid of slavery in the North as well. He just kind of did it in two different steps. I hear the argument that it was actually had to do with states' rights and all that, and by states' rights they obviously meant slavery back then, not just states' rights. Because then you look at other stuff like the Fugitive Slave Act, Wilmot Proviso, Missouri Compromise. All of those were more. They had nothing to do with states. Well, in fact, they talked about federal acts superseding states' rights. About how the federal government would have the right to take captured slaves and bring them back to the state, even if the state that they're in didn't want them to. So, it's states' rights when it was convenient for them. And by the way, then it's interesting when you get into the Civil War, how the fact that they, were so much about states' rights made them a confederacy, but that also meant that a lot of states didn't necessarily feel like going to protect some other state way over yonder and helping them out. So it kind of spelt out their doom. And it really is, you can't get away from it. Like many people, when they talk about U.S. history, they want to ignore almost the slavery aspect or something. There's no ignoring it. It was such a big part of everything going on here that you can't. And like they say, that's the history. That's you take the history of your country, of whatever you're studying, you take the good and the bad, and yeah, that's a very bad aspect, but it's there. So what else do I want to mention? Oh yeah, so this guy was a terrible president. He probably gets my vote for the most evil president, Andrew Johnson. Look at him, he's like, I'm mad they wrote a biography about me. But yeah, he got rid of the Civil Rights Act like right after the Civil War, and so you had to wait another 100 years until another president. I think the next president Johnson, Lyndon B. Johnson, actually signed the Civil Rights Act, and he got rid of it. He's like, oh, now we're doing too much for African Americans. This is right after the Civil War. Like he's talking about former slaves. Like it's ridiculous. Anyway, then I don't know. I feel like I have something to say for each president, but then I'll keep going. We're already at almost 10 minutes here, so I don't want to keep going too long. This guy is probably the most the smartest president. Why am I holding that upside down? This is the smartest president, but then again, he was probably the one who did least while in office. He was so prepared to become a president, and he was extremely smart, spoke all these languages, had all this experience. But then when he got and he became president, basically he did this underhanded deal with Henry Clay, and because of that, when he got found out, everyone got mad, and he wasn't able to do anything as president. But he did a lot before presidency and after the presidency. So it's interesting to read about that. Grant, I have a newfound respect for Grant. He was my biggest surprise until I got to Garfield for a president, because as the most underestimated president, I think, because now you mainly remember him. Obviously, he won the Civil War, but he was also a drunk. That's what you remember him for. But there was so much more to him, and actually, I ended up admiring him quite a bit. Although I do think, I mean, obviously, he's an excellent biographer, but I do think he was a bit nice. And that's another thing you get about all these biographies. If you're going to write a biography about a president or about anyone, you get so into them that it becomes very hard not to excuse all the mistakes they made, because you kind of start understanding their way of thinking. And you're like, oh, he did that, but he only did that because of blah, blah, blah that happened before and stuff like that. And I think it's very difficult when you write a biography to kind of be able to step back and see the person more objectively. And in fact, I mean, you shouldn't be judging. You should just be talking about it, but you can't help but judge because you're writing everything about this person's life. You're immersed in this person's life for a couple of years, basically. What else? This was another one I thought was underrated. James K. Polk. He seemed very capable and very knowledgeable, and with what he was doing. On the other hand, not much happened during his presidency, so that's why you don't hear about him much. And who else? Who else do I want to talk about? I mean, I don't know. That's pretty much it. I think my favorite president is still probably Thomas Jefferson, just because he was so all over the place, but he did so many things, and there's no discounting the fact that he was a genius. I mean, a lot of the founding fathers were geniuses. I think it's very interesting that you had this cluster of geniuses all at the same time in the same place. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, James Garfield was a very pleasant surprise. You have a lot of these that really not good presidents, from Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore just happened to become president just because he was vice president and Zachary Taylor died. And a lot of the presidents who became president because someone else died before them ended up not being very good presidents. From John Tyler to the Mutton Chops, what's his name? Chester Arthur, yeah. To all these ones who... to Millard Fillmore. I just mentioned him. Why couldn't I? Anyway, to all these people who became president because the president before them died, and so they just happened to be president, and they didn't really run for presidency, it's usually pretty disappointing. Chester Arthur was very interesting because he was extremely corrupt, and he was running with Conklin, who was basically, what was his name? Roscoe Conklin, who was the head of all the most corrupt people basically in... And they were called the stalwarts, and they were very blatant about the stuff like, you give us payment, we'll give you an office, we'll give you, you can be working in the government and all that. And so you had all these extremely incompetent people running all these things in government, especially in New York. And Chester Arthur was one of them. James Garfield had to make him VP basically because that was how he became president. But what he did was, once he made him VP, he took all the powers away from him, and James Garfield did his own thing. James Garfield was actually, I think, extremely capable, and I think would have made a very good president. Unfortunately, he had some wacko who killed him, and then Chester Arthur suddenly became president. But that part's interesting because suddenly he had a change of heart. Apparently, he was crying and everything. Like he had this breakdown when he found out he was going to be president. He did not want that. But when he became president, he repudiated Roscoe Conklin and decided, no, I'm going to start doing the right thing. And in fact, he had correspondence with this one lady called Julia Sand, I think, and she was just a random lady, never met him or anything, but just started writing to him and said, I know you must be in a very difficult spot, because you have this reputation for being corrupt, and now you're here, but I have faith in you, you can do the right thing. And she would write these long letters to him and all that. And in fact, later during his presidency, he went to visit her in her apartment in New York. But it was very interesting because she had nothing to do with him, but they obviously struck a chord with him. And so he kept all the letters, and in fact, they got discovered by his grandson later, and it was a whole interesting thing. But I really think more presidents would benefit from having someone like that, whose advice they could actually take seriously. Someone completely unknown to them, who doesn't have to be a yes man, and can say things clearly but respectfully. Anyway, so yeah, there's interesting stuff for almost everyone. Almost, like some are not too interesting. Franklin Pierce wasn't all that interesting at all. Neither was Millard Fillmore, really. He had interesting points, but yeah, not too much. Who else? James Buchanan was probably my vote for the worst president ever. I mean, it's between him and Andrew Johnson, quite frankly. So one before Lincoln, one after Lincoln, but they were both horrible, horrible presidents. Yeah, that's pretty much all. I'm going to cap it there. If you have any specific things you'd like to hear about presidents, I'd be happy to talk about it later. And I can give recommendations. Maybe I'll give a link to the book. If you go to my Goodreads, you can see all the books that I read about U.S. presidents, or else I can probably link to them in the description below, I guess. But yeah, I'll keep reading. Right now I'm on Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of William Henry Harrison. And I already did Grover Cleveland, but Grover Cleveland was president, then Benjamin Harrison, and then Grover Cleveland again. It's the first time it's ever happened. And that's why actually it messed up the numbers, because for some reason they counted him as two numbers. I think what was it? Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd. So Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and the 24th. Sorry, for some reason I wanted to get that right. Anyway, I feel like there's something interesting, more or less, in each one of these biographies. I'll keep reading on. I have Benjamin Harrison now, since I already did Grover Cleveland. He's the 22nd and 24th president. Then I'll be doing William McKinley next. In fact, I think I found a good biography of William McKinley that I like. I'm taking my time with these, obviously, so it won't be rushed or anything. But yeah, I look forward to it. I think it'll be interesting. Not all of them are going to be huge tomes like this or like this. This I found in a library sale, by the way. And yeah, this too, it was like $5, $6. So, I decided to get it. But like I said, if I can't find anything else that really inspires me, I just get the Arthur Schlesinger versions, which tend to be about this size, more or less, but are still interesting. But that's the thing. If I'm going through someone like William Henry Harrison, I'm not going to get anything bigger than that, But that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or things you'd like me to do with the next biographies that I read, feel free to let me know. I've been talking way too long on this one already, so I'll leave it at that. And I know this doesn't have anything to do with translation, but the other time when I talked about books, there seemed to be some interest in it, although those were books in translation, so it made more sense. But like I've said before, this is my channel, so I get to talk about what I want to on it. And I want to talk about these. And so that's it. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Okay, thanks. Bye. Savedum. I'm mad they wrote a biography about me.